This is what matters right here. Okay, so let's go over these one at a time. And let's talk through it, and then I want to get your thoughts on some of these as well before I tell you what I think.
Sure.
So let's start with number one. Dash and jump after fireballs. This is like the core, I'd say. Core gameplay element. This is like the core of your gameplay. Well, if I boil down all the things that don't matter, all the white noise that's irrelevant, this is the core of your strategy. The strategy is throw fireball, and then if fireball hit, throw another fireball. If fireball block, maybe throw another fireball, or jump or dash. Usually it's one of these things. I'll split it to I'll say like dash 20% second fireball. It's actually more like 30% second fireball, 10% jump. That's like, I'd say, in my personal opinion from memory, the ratio of how often you selected each different option, right?
Yeah.
So you're selecting these options and you're prioritizing some over the other. I'm guessing based on like how hard you feel like you get punished for one over the other. The dash feels very rewarding because you get to dash back in. Your thing is like block string ending in fireball, and then this situation happens. Or if you haven't touched the other person yet, you start with this situation. And if the dash goes through, you get dash in and you start the situation again, block string fireball situation. And the dash allows you to kind of like, for example, button fireball, dash button fireball, dash button fireball. It's kind of like the core of like what you're doing, right?
Sure.
And
Sure.
the dash probably gets punished the least of these options. It's the least risky for you in your mind. So it's the one that evolves to happen the most often, right? The fireball, the second fireball, is something that you've developed as a natural pattern. Any player that plays this game is going to fireball and then fireball again, right away. Pretty normal. It's usually comes in pairs of 2. It's rare for it to be in pairs of 3, but it does happen. It's based on range. If you're closer to me, I've noticed it's usually only in pairs of 2. And then 10% of the time you'll jump. The jump is like preemptive. Like you'll shoot the fireball, I'll block it, and you'll jump right away. Almost like you're trying to, if I had to guess, you're trying to read well, I don't even know if it's a read. This is where I'm gonna have to get your thoughts on it. You're trying to like see if I'll throw a revenge fireball. Like after blocking your fireball, I'll throw one and you'll hit me with a jump in. You're seeking out like luck jump ins, hoping I do what you want. And then that is like the one you do the least because you're getting anti-aired. And more than likely you try not to do it too much. The second fireball, the reason you only do it 30% of the time and it and the dash are not swapped is more than likely because you've eaten too many jump-ins on the second fireball, and you've cut that down to, you've made the dash the priority because it's the one that gets punished the least. Eating a jump-in on your second fireball has kind of pissed you off enough where you've done it probably the least. You've done it less than you used to. And the jump is a mixture of getting anti-aired and also a mixture of like your mind has been taught from all the different matchups that jumping is generally more effective in some places than others. And also you're trying not to jump too much. Like for example, if you play a Lara player a lot, if you're a person that fights Lara all the time, you probably don't have a jumping habit because her stand medium punch is so good that even when you fight other characters, you don't jump because your brain's been trained like a dog. Don't jump. People will anti you, right? Even though Lara's medium punch is not relevant in any other matchup, obviously, your mind will remember that. So I think that's why that one's the least. But it's always in the same place. So I know that the function doesn't change regardless of the frequency, right? So what do you think about this assessment of you?
No, I think it's pretty accurate actually. Yeah, it's freakishly accurate.
Yeah. So, what do you think is the problem with this?
Well, I know the dashes after fireballs, like, because I have a habit of doing them after EX. Like, it's actually kind of like I would see
Yeah.
myself doing it and be like, "Don't do it again." Then I would do it again. Yeah, sometimes for me after EX fireball, like I always want to dash there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the jump in, like, yeah, I definitely have learned not to, to minimize the jumps to like certain spaces, or at least
Mm-hmm.
the least amount of times because yeah, I've eaten a whole lot of uppercuts. And the two fireball pattern is definitely correct. Because people they either do the revenge fireball after you hit them, because they're, you hit them with a fireball and they remember, oh, I got a fireball too, and they'll like do the revenge fireball. You can
Mm-hmm.
usually jump in on them, or I do the two fireball and wait to see if they're going to actually jump.
Right. And usually, now if they jump right away, you eat the jump, and if they jump on reaction to the second fireball, you get a DP. Right. Double
Yeah,
fireball is not necessarily a bad thing, right? But that's, I guess we'll get to fireball pattern. We'll get to that. That's neither here nor there. I was just seeing what got you to that thought process. Now, the
sure,
problem with this is that there is no such thing as bad options in the sense of like what you're selecting to do. None of these are bad things to do. Not a single one of them. What the problem is that if I was able in the time span of a single first to five to dissect you so thoroughly on what the pattern is and the frequency of each option, that means that, how do I explain this? Uh, a good player is not so easily dissected.
sure.
There's enough differentiation and change in the, for example, I could imagine if I added, instead of it being, because I'm basing it on 100%, 60 30 10, right?
Hmm.
Imagine if I had 10 options and they were all 10%. That might make it seem like all of them are infrequent, but that means all of them are equally frequent when it happens, right? Which means all
Sure.
of them are equally likely to happen, all of them are equally likely to work. Now, there's a concept in fighting games, I'm not sure if you're aware of or not. I always ask to make sure, is mental stack, right? Is that a
Yeah,
concept you're
yeah,
familiar with?
yeah. Very familiar with that.
Okay. So if my mental stack is able to lock onto certain patterns, like frequencies of certain, for example, the dash after the fireball, the moment I realize what, because I'm paying attention, I'm watching, right? That's the main thing a good player will do is they're gonna watch what you're doing and see and search for the patterns. The human brain is actually not that good at snap decision making or reacting to things. That's not the human brain's specialty. The human brain specialty is pattern dissection. We notice patterns in everything, right? This is there's a common underlying trait all humans have, and that's their ability to see red car and another red car and recognize it as the same red car, right?
Hmm.
Just as an example, right? We see things and we draw conclusions between them. We're able to fill in gaps in our mind and see patterns, right? Or draw conclusions from the patterns we see. Humans are really good at this. And you're doing it whether you're consciously doing it on purpose and then like remembering the information, or if you're doing it like subconsciously, which is what people will, heart players will usually call like a read, right?
Sure.
Your brain is actually paying attention in the background, and like have you ever felt like you knew exactly what to do, but you if someone asked you how you knew, you just like, I felt it.
Yeah,
What that
yeah,
is that's actually your brain subconsciously watching and analyzing the information in front of you, even though you're not like consciously aware of it, right? So
hmm,
it's recognizing a pattern, and that's why you knew to jump. Is because the brain said there's a pattern, and this is the place for that, and timing for that pattern, right? So your brain's
yeah,
always watching for patterns and timing. So when I see this, the first thing my mental stack locks onto is the dash is prevalent, everything else is secondary. If I get hit by for example, let's say you do double fireball, and I decide to preemptively stick out a button to check the dash. If I get
mm,
hit by the fireball, that is extremely low risk for me. I don't really care. If anything, it just inches me very. It does so little damage. Even with the new 10 damage buff to his fireball, it doesn't do enough damage where I'm like, okay, I need to stop doing that. It just inches me closer and closer to V trigger, and I'm more likely to be right than I am to be wrong because of the frequency of the dash. If I
Sure.
get hit by a fireball, that's 70 damage. If I hit you, that's 140 and I'm on top of you. I'm probably going to throw you or something. So let's
Mm-hmm.
see, 140, and then Ryu's throw is 130. So that comes out to 270. And then I do low forward fireball, which is 10 chip on block. So I'd say like 10 white life and 10 chip. So all in all, that comes out to our odds and ends 300 damage, right?
Sure.
So if that situation, and that's if you don't tech my throw or whatever, but then you're risking that 300 becoming like 500 if you tech if I punish you for delay teching on wake up, right? So let's just say I do low forward Tatsu, I dash up, I throw you, I do meaty low forward fireball, right? Let's say that
Mm-hmm.
sequence goes through. If I check your dash that way, I'm willing to eat 5 fireballs in a row. I don't give a fuck. Because if I get, for example, that was one dash check. If I get a second one, that 300 becomes 600 if that sequence goes through. If I get a third one, that 600 becomes 900. Do you see how this outscales the fireballs very quickly?
Yeah.
As long as that situation keeps being favorable for me, I have no reason to stop even if you hit me with 100,000 fireballs. I don't give a fuck. Plus, at any point, I could make the pattern recognition decision to go, I'm going to sneak in a jump here. Like 1, 2. If 1, 2 starts happening more than the dash, I'll do, wait, 1, I'll jump, right? Now, I could be wrong and you could DP me, but again, the DP, low damage, the reward for being right, a full jump in, right? So these are things that are, I'm willing to take gambles on these things because all the ways you could stop me are horribly outscaled by the ways of me being correct. I only need to be right a few, like once or twice, and the round is over. So the problem with this gameplay is that you are relying on me never being right, not even once, and that is just simply not going to happen. Like statistically speaking, even if
Yeah,
I wasn't
sure.
even if I wasn't much better than you, because there's a skill difference, right? Like my ability to pick up on this information. Let's say you fought someone your own skill level.
Mm-hmm.
This will work more often, but you're not likely to never ever be wrong. That's just not statistically feasible, right? This gameplay is too gamble oriented on that. It's too reliant on them never doing the right thing. That's the problem.
Hmm.
So what we need is we need gameplay that has enough variation where them trying to pick up on these things feels pointless. For example, if this dash became like we do question mark. Let's say it became 20%. And let's say that other missing 40% we just allocated elsewhere was moved to you doing like fireball walk forward. Now suddenly I'm sticking out buttons trying to preemptively stop the dash because I can't necessarily beat the dash every time on reaction. That's much harder. That's much harder, and that's why I'm not doing it. If I was forced to check that dash on reaction, my success rate would skyrocket downward. It would plummet like a rock, right?
Sure.
So you walking forward does two things. One, I could get whiff punished on my buffer, like me sticking out a button. Two, if you did like for example, fireball, walk forward, heavy punch. If I'm sticking out a button every time, trying to stop the dash, I'm gonna get clipped by forward heavy punch over and over again. And that obviously leads to a lot of damage. I can't afford to take that over and over again. So what's gonna happen is I'm gonna start being passive. Instead of sticking out buttons preemptively, I'm gonna start trying to react to the dash. Now obviously I can do that. I'm good enough where I can react to dashes, I want to say like 60-70% of the time. But it's much harder. And if I'm wrong, I get counter hit. When you dash up, I eat a combo, right? So this, suddenly your fireball has become something that's like the what happens after the fireball game is somewhat annoying, right? This also makes my jumps easier to read because I'm more likely to want to jump to beat the fireball in the first place. I'm not going to jump on fireball anymore. I'm just going to jump in neutral to neutralize the first fireball. I'm not saying I would do that specifically because what I would really do is back up parry the fireball and force you to negate that situation from ever happening. But most people are going to try to neutralize the initial fireball that creates this pattern to happen that's negative for them, right? Whenever a negative pattern happens for someone, they try to neutralize the initial thing that starts the pattern. even if they're not aware of that, right? So, for
Sure.
example, if you're doing fireball dash throw, and they're never stopping you, they're not going to start stopping the dash throw. They're going to start trying to stop the fireball. Most people are going to think like that. So if you start doing fireball dash throw, you're going to notice that a lot of people just start jumping. Like randomly in neutral, they'll just start jumping out of nowhere. And then as long as you're not like autopiloting the fireball at the same spot every time, it's free uppercuts, right? That's how people think. So the problem with this pattern is that I'm guessing you probably eat random jump-ins all the time.
Yeah, more than I should.
Right. And more than likely, the dash, what happens, and this is probably also why I think your crosscuts got a lot, because I think your crosscuts are better than your normal anti-airs. And what crosscut is easier, but I also think you've had more practice. Because I think what's happening here is when you do fireball dash and they jump, you're dashing underneath them a lot. How often does that happen? You dash underneath and uppercut them.
Yeah, that happens a lot. Like I actually will try to crowd people to make them jump. Because at the level I'm playing at, they tend to jump a lot.
Yeah. And I'm guessing when you do like fireball dash, that happens a lot where they jump over you and just Yeah, so more than likely that's what caused that to happen. So what we need to do here is we need to create better patterns after this. And how we'll get to that a little later. I just want to break down this thing one element at a time because there's a lot to unpack here.